Well, yesterday's video was a bit of a crap show, partly because it got cut off and I got carried away and I started to talk about a couple of transits that I said I would do in a different video, but then I started to squeeze them in, and partly because I prepared for it and had data for it in the way that I normally don't. In other words, I really enjoy just doing these videos and, speaking sort of extemporaneously, as opposed to having a list of dates and a list of transits to go through. And especially when the transits are in multiple signs, as they now are in Aquarius and Pisces and Taurus and Gemini and Cancer and Leo, it can, if you're not careful, one of these videos can basically turn into sort of a list of dates and an attempt to make sense of the transits and all those dates that, it's almost like it's very hard to be successful and actually put something together like that. So that video is still there, and I'm going to put a link to it at the end of this one. It's the Venus and Mars and Leo video, and it's still, I think especially if you know and understand astrology and astrology basics and know your chart, know which signs are in which houses, you'll still find that quite useful. But I wanted to do another video on Venus and Mars in Leo today, and give you what I think are the salient points to focus on and to look at. I'm going to start by talking about the two transits that are coming up tomorrow. Today is July the 5th. And July the 6th and July the 7th, depending on where you're at, you're going to see two transits coming up. One is Venus opposing Saturn, and the other is Mercury squaring Neptune. And yesterday's video was talking about these, and I wanted to do yesterday's video to impart a sense of urgency with regard to boundary setting. And I talked about the fact that for a while now, since the Mercury in Gemini video, which you'll find in my video list, there's been a lot of emphasis on the planets in Gemini squaring the planets in Pisces. I know this sounds very repetitive, but I will move on to the heart of the matter in a second. And how with the eclipses and with Mercury retrograde and with Mercury still being in Gemini, those squares are still very active, because we've got the third and final square between Mercury and Neptune tomorrow or day after, depending on where you live. And then, of course, we've also got the fact that the planets, as they go past Gemini, go through Gemini, they go into Cancer. And in the very last degrees of Cancer, they oppose Pluto, which is a planet of sort of domination. So the squares to Neptune encourage you to look at either deceit or losing yourself somehow, losing your sense of material reality, losing your sense of self-care, losing your sense of what constitutes a certain type of success on this planet. In sort of 3D reality, Neptune tends to dissolve all boundaries. Sort of Neptune, in its one form of, Neptune is either inspiration or intense spirituality, or else it's a little bit like you're drunk on something. It's like you've checked out, or it's like you're intoxicated. And so certain types of spiritual practices, including extremely exalted spiritual practices that deal with renunciation and only focusing on the oneness, and really developing very skilled meditation practices so that you detach from everything around you and try and merge yourself with your true nature or your essential nature and oneness. But that means a giving up of ambition. It means a giving up of your emotional ties to everything and everybody. We're really talking about renunciation. But then when it comes to renunciation and loss, and necessary renunciation and loss, sometimes Neptune will introduce deceit and thievery and manipulation and gaslighting. And sometimes it can introduce our own inability to really be able to see what is going on in these kinds of situations. And so boundary setting becomes really important. And so the squares between the planets in Gemini and the planets in Pisces have been, and the eclipses that we had on May the 26th and June the 10th, this idea of boundary setting was really quite important and significant. I know you've heard me say this in other videos. I know this is being repetitive, but just bear with me, because I'm going back to my old way of doing videos, and rather than give you a litany of dates, just provide a more useful and helpful summary. And this will develop. Just bear with me. the other thing I said about the Gemini Neptune squares is that the Gemini side of things seems to be talking about the who, and the Neptune side seems to be talking about the what. So what do you stand to lose? What do you stand to give up on? What is under threat? And who is threatening it? So that's the who, the Gemini, and the what. All right. Planets from Gemini: Mars, Venus, now the Sun, move into Cancer. And in Cancer, in the last degrees of Cancer, they oppose Pluto. So with these squares, we are moving to a series of oppositions. Oppositions to Pluto typically imply power struggles. Now, some of these power struggles can be violent, or getting mugged, getting hit. Sometimes these power struggles are much more manipulative and psychological. Again, these themes of sort of gaslighting that sort of come into the equation. But they are oppositions, which are a little bit more, it's a different energy. It requires conflict. It's as if with the squares in Neptune have developed into a set of transits that now require us to stand up for ourselves. And then, of course, as the planets move past Cancer to the sign of Leo, and we currently have Venus and Mars in Leo, and they're going to come together in about a week or so, July the 13th. And I'll get to that energy in a second. They oppose the planet Saturn. And Saturn has a very serious side to him. Dry, formal, do the right thing, rule-bound, integrity-bound, sort of like the strict, non-fun teacher that doesn't want you to get away with anything that's not going to be good for you or right for you. You really need to watch your intentions. You really need to be careful that you don't end up doing things. And Saturn is in Aquarius. You really need to be careful that you don't end up doing things that are what I would call the path of least resistance, fall into patterns and boundaries that Saturn is requiring and asking you to change and demanding you change, and putting examples in front of you and putting problems and challenges and hurdles in front of you, in order to surmount, you've got to develop a new the required set of skills in this part of the chart. When planets oppose Saturn, Mars opposed Saturn on July the 1st, that really is a throwdown or a fight energy, okay? That really is I'm going to speak my mind now. I'm going to do things at the best and the highest quality of Mars opposing Saturn on July the 1st. Wouldn't surprise me as if most of you actually heading to that date had words or got to a point where you felt like you were done with something that had been going on for a while. Venus opposing Saturn in some ways can mean a restriction on your love life or your financial life, where the strict teacher is looking at you and going, I'm not going to let you get away with this. Okay, Venus is a planet. Venus is a feminine planet. So there's desire, but there's also giving. There's the loving, feminine yin side of the attraction, spark, electric circuit. Now, whether you are biologically female, whether you identify as female, whatever your gender identification, biological gender, whatever your gender identification is, all of us have a feminine receptive and a masculine yang side to us, because we have Mars and Venus somewhere in that chart, and we have the Sun somewhere in that chart, and the Moon somewhere in that chart, and so on and so forth. So one of the things, if you were to say, how are these transits affecting me? One of the things could be that there's an imposition of discipline around finances, around kind of a do the right thing energy. I'm watching you. No, you can't get away with this. No, don't do this. Coming across people who are a little bit Saturnian, who are acting in your best interests, but kind of taking the fun out of the situation, or not letting you get away with things that you have before. With Mars, it would be an invitation to fight and stand up for yourself. With Venus, it would be something to do with relationships and money, typically. It could be the arts. But with Venus, again, this is something that is coming up for tomorrow and day after. There could be, because we're talking about relationships and money, again, there can be a need to stand up for your relationships and your money. And For some of you, your love. But what does it mean to stand up for your relationships and your money and your love? With Venus, we inevitably are made to think about our values and what we value. What do you value? What are your values? What are your principles? What is your compass? And when you have an opposition like Venus opposite Saturn, somewhere you've got to go back to that principle and also really look at your own sense of self-worth. How do you value yourself? You know, one of the most potent sign axes when it comes to relationships is Taurus and Scorpio. And Venus rules Taurus, and Mars, traditionally, along with Pluto now, rules Scorpio. Fascinating, you know, two feminine signs, one of which is ruled by the male planet, Mars. Sometimes when it comes to exercising self-worth, we will still fall into scorpionic patterns, comparisons, one-upmanship, a sense of competitiveness, power play. Who got there first? Ha 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 ha, that kind of energy. Intense involvement. No, I'm standing in my own power. I'm standing in my own power. If you're kind of in that, no, I'm not going to let someone get away with this. If you're in that, you know, examine to see whether you're really in a scorpionic framework or in a Taurian framework. A Taurian framework is much simpler. Today I'm going to do this. When the chatter starts to involve other people and what they're doing and wanting to get involved and meshed with them and start to get into power battles or sort of pulling out the scales and seeing who's doing what, you might think that you're standing up for your self-worth, but you might have fallen into the scorpionic trap. Whereas in the Venusian energy, there's just, here I am, and this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to do today. And like energies can join me or not. But I'm not really interested in anything. I'm interested in what I am building and nurturing. Venus, love, self-love, love for one's potential, love for what one is nurturing and building and monetizing. Venus, the planet of money, luxuries. So be mindful when Venus is opposing Saturn that your own values and what you value and your own sense of self-worth is being examined when it comes to activities that you might end up wanting to participate in that blur boundaries or debase you in some way, that put you in this kind of the dark side of Venus, the subservient side of Venus, these kind of scorpionic involvement. What are they doing? How can I slide into their DMs? How can I get their attention? Who is behaving this way to me, that way? You know, all that kind of scorpionic. So Venus opposite Saturn, protecting your boundaries, protecting what you value when it comes to relationships and money. Some of this could be a development of and from, because when Venus opposes Saturn, Mercury squaring Neptune, there could be those themes of deceit and gaslighting, especially if these energies concern crises that occurred in 2015 and 2016. This could all be linked. Now let me talk a little bit about the signs where all of this is happening. I'm going to start with Aquarius. The sign of Aquarius is very important this year because for the bulk of the year, Jupiter, the planet of starting a 12-year cycle, ending a 12-year cycle, starting a 12-year cycle, new beginnings, is largely in Aquarius. Now, it is temporarily between the middle of May to the end of July in Pisces. It is now retrograde, and at the end of July, it's going to retrograde back into Aquarius till the end of the year, for all intents and purposes. Okay? I'm not going to haggle the last few days of December. Not right now. Saturn entered Aquarius in the first half of 2020. We had the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of social questioning. And then Saturn came into Aquarius along with Jupiter in the middle of December last year. We had it's the results of the election and a lot of things that we're dealing with. Now, with Saturn in Aquarius, it's not just the liberal side. Everyone gets Saturn Aquarius is very much a transit of the truth. So whether you're liberal or whether you're conservative or however you identify politically and socially and whatever you question, ultimately Saturn in Aquarius is the ultimate transit that is about the truth. So what becomes really important under this is what is really happening, what is really logical, what is really factual. Let's take all the romance out of the situation, no BS, what is the truth? So on the one hand, you have the BS in a lot of sort of social and social systemic issues that are being exposed and fought, but at the same time, and I'm not taking sides here, I'm just going to suggest this, and I'm going to, when it comes to certain aspects related to science and technology and the virus, there's as much energy around what is really going on here, who created what and how was it created and who all were involved. This is not a channel where we're going to point fingers on nationalities. That is my humble opinion. Is against everything that is holy and proper. I would advise you to be careful of incurring that kind of karma, which is to just blindly point fingers at people of a certain nationality as being responsible for something, because it's not how we would like to be treated. I don't know that any nation has clean hands. But there are questions around what is really truthful, where are there systemic issues, what is in the benefit of humanity. And I think that no matter who you are, a lot of these questions are going to start to and are being looked at. On a personal level, wherever Aquarius sits in your chart, the good news is this year you have a rejuvenation thanks to Jupiter, but you also have Saturn here. So it is very important to look at where Aquarius is in your chart, what house does it occupy, what does it stand for, and make sure that you are protecting yourself and your potential and your boundaries. You will be made to, you will be asked to, you will have to, or else you will suffer the consequences. And with Saturn, that word suffer becomes very important. Now, that sounds very scary and very stern, and very bad things are going to happen to you. Saturn is always trying to work on your behalf. Do not fall into the path of least resistance here on patterns and boundaries that have been in place for a long time. And the way you feel Saturn's energy is Saturn comes into a part of the chart and all of a sudden it becomes unacceptable. What has been acceptable for almost a period of 28 years. And there has to be a maturing, very Saturnian word, and aging in the right way, in a good way, in a positive way, there is such a thing, wherever Saturn transits. So when it comes to commitments, Saturnian, promises, contracts, productivity, hard work, habits, very Saturnian, building something for the long term. Where Aquarius sits in your chart, you're going to feel that energy through March of 2023. Saturn squares Uranus this year, the big transit in Taurus. Socially and politically, whatever liberation the planet has to go through is somehow dependent on these systemic issues that have to be examined. But whatever liberation and authenticity Uranus is trying to create in the part of the chart where Taurus sits for you, the house it occupies, what that house stands for, is dependent on your ability to show up for yourself in a disciplined and self-loving manner where Aquarius is in your chart. Saturn is a very important planet right now because Mars opposed it on July the 1st. Venus is opposing it in the next couple of days. This is why I keep talking about boundaries and do what you need to do to protect yourself and start to take some action, because the planetary transits, to some extent Cancer, but especially in Leo, give you greater, you're no longer in a place where you've sort of been delivered the 1-2 punch of the eclipses and you're just like, oh my God, what happened? I can't barely get up. Now you're getting up, and it's time to get in the ring and figure out what you need to do. And as I said, assertively, not aggressively, in the spirit of investigation and communication and getting clarity, because Mercury is a key planet right now. It squares Neptune for the 3rd time, the planet of deception, in the sign of Gemini. after it has gone direct, after the eclipses have occurred. The dust is settling. Proactively settle the dust. Ask the questions. Do what you need to. And if things emerge that require action, then take them. But enter the ring. Why Saturn and Uranus, Saturn Aquarius is also important is that the next two full moons at the end of July and end of August are in Aquarius. So something in this part of the chart is brewing, and these oppositions are telling a story. Now, these two full moons aren't really directly connected. They aren't really conjunct Saturn in any way than the very first degree of Aquarius and the last degree of Aquarius, but still important enough. Still important. It's a set of energies in Aquarius. The Pisces energies, I've talked about crises in 2015, 2016. Loss, deception, worry, lack of clarity, disappointment in how you expected people who were associated with the part of the chart in which Pisces sits in your chart. Understanding that you cannot manage and control them. Understanding that they're not going to show up in the way that you're expecting them to, 2015, 2016. And dealing with those energies. Over the summer, and all my clients have felt this in some way, shape, or form. This is the biggest thing people have felt, has been Jupiter's entry into Pisces in the middle of May. People started to feel it in the beginning of May. Briefly this year, Jupiter moved into Pisces, still there, moving out end of July. So a new beginning being created and some attempt at healing and a gift being given in that part of the chart. But this is where Neptune is still present. And so some of this kind of needing to protect the gift that is being created where Pisces sits in your chart and boundaries being put in place becomes really important. Jupiter comes in to finish the work in this part of the chart next year. However, after March 2023, Saturn comes into this part of the chart as if to say, all right, let's sort out all the drama that has been going on here since 2015 once and for all, and boundaries and patterns and testing how well you're doing this year and next year in the part of the chart where Pisces sits becomes important. This is why I keep saying, if you need to enter the ring and draw certain lines, do so. We've covered Uranus and Taurus, liberation, authenticity there. Uranus probably being my favorite planet. And then in Gemini, so much going on this year. Yesterday's video will give you a list of transits that you can go over if you need to again. Chances are the people we are finding ourselves contending with are related to the part of the chart where Gemini sits, so the house it occupies. And then, since then, the transits that are going on in Venus and Leo, the signs after Gemini, are normal annual transits, but they're helping develop and give us a little bit of warmth and action and activity, the story of the eclipses that occurred in the Gemini, Sagittarius axis. Three more things. The next lunar eclipse will be in Taurus, so the eclipses are changing signs, and we can feel it because that's where things are building and developing. November the 19th, September the 19th being an important date. August the 10th, the week before and week after, is an important date for the Gemini solar eclipse on June the 10th. And I will leave it at that. The bottom line is, if you're feeling like you need to put certain things in place and in stone, and if you need to defend yourself, and if you need to consult with someone, it doesn't even necessarily need to be that you need to be in communication or conversation with an adversary. I'm trying to cover things very generally here. I'm not talking, I don't have your chart. I'm not talking to you individually. So you've got to figure out if this applies to you and how. If you need to talk to a qualified professional, a lawyer, a doctor, or something, do that so that even that can become a step towards greater clarity and an appropriate attempt at figuring out, as I've said so many times in these videos, whether you're dealing with a bee in the room or a grizzly bear. Finally, when I process these videos, just know that YouTube seems to be having some issues. Typically, it offers us 3 thumbnails that we can use as the title image of the video, and it's having some trouble doing that. You'll notice with other videos you follow too, where all of a sudden you'll have videos that have a gray background, so just know that's going on. I feel so much better having done this video, guys, because I feel like you finally have something to pin the current energies onto. Next 24 hours, just think about everything that has been going on, and anything where you feel like you need to get up and stand up for yourself. Be assertive and inquisitive, investigative, I would encourage you to start that process or get into it. Okay? At least that's what the astrology is suggesting. What is the harm in asking a few questions to try and gain some clarity? But if you need to consult with a lawyer or someone like that first, depending on your situation, do so that you can enter the ring prepared and in the right way. If you like this video, found it useful, share it, like it, comment on it. All of that gives us traffic on YouTube. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, click on the bell icon so that you're notified when I do new videos. My contact information in the description section. Email me there for rates for readings if you want an easy to read version of your chart, and we can take it from there. Thanks for subscribing to my channel and listening to my videos.